Do you need provision from God in your present trial? If so, you came to the right place today. Welcome to the Daily Devo. I am Vince Miller. We're in a brand new series on the book of 1 Samuel. We have just begun chapter 1. The first chapter's theme is the 6 people who influenced Samuel's life. We started with Elkanah, then Peninnah, and today, his mother, Hannah. We're going to be jumping down to verses 9 through 11 today. Hannah at this moment has slipped away from the family while in Shiloh. She is headed up to the tabernacle by herself to pray, and the text reads, "After they had eaten and drunk in Shiloh, Hannah rose. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. And she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head." 2 things about Hannah stand out to me when I read this text: her character and her commitment. First, let's look at her character. Hannah has remarkable character. At least the text presents her as a humble wife and mother and a follower who is faithful from beginning to end. She is faithful through emotional distress, even doubt and mistreatment. She never gives up on what she believes that God can do in her barren situation. And I think she's inspirational because many people, I think, would have given up on God by this point. I mean, go back to Abraham and Sarah. Even Sarah gave up on believing that God was going to provide her with a child. She laughed at God, but not Hannah. She makes another trip to the tabernacle year after year after year, even though Peninnah disdains her and Eli degrades her. Now, I think some believers are not properly prepared for this part of the spiritual journey. You know what I'm talking about? Those long periods of waiting. You see, we wrongly believe that the spiritual life should be like quick and easy, and we should get all these quick and easy answers from God. But this is not how it always works. Sometimes it comes with long periods of waiting. And in these times, what is required of us is faithfulness. That is what Hannah models right here. Faithfulness in a very long period of distress. But number 2, she also illustrates commitment. You'll notice Hannah's commitment in the vow that she makes to God. And it's a great vow. But first, let's make sure we understand what a vow is. You see, in the Old Testament, a vow was a solemn promise made to God. It was made on 3 occasions: in response to a blessing received by God, in a desperate situation calling out to God, or in an act of devotion to God. When we think about vows today, we typically think about marital vows, don't we? Which don't have the same weight as they used to, primarily because we have subtracted God from these vows. In the Old Testament, like we see here, vows were made to God. They were taken very seriously. They were permanently binding, as a vow to God should be. You see, when God makes a vow to us, he makes good on it. And when we make a vow to God, we should make good on it too. Now, there were a lot of examples of these vows in the Old Testament. I've scribed some of them down below so you can take a look at them in the comments, but I want to notice the Nazirite vow today. The Nazirite vow is described in Numbers chapter 6. It involved a period of consecration which an individual abstained from alcohol, avoiding contact with the dead, and refrained from cutting their hair. This vow was often taken for a specific period of time as an expression of dedication and devotion to God. And it's exactly part of the vow that Hannah makes here to God within a greater vow. But you see, if you continue reading the text, you realize that Hannah has a separate vow here. What I love about Hannah's vow is the potency of it. It's not just a vow within a vow. It is the promise to give to God what Hannah has longed for her whole life. It is what is most precious to her that she doesn't even presently have. Hannah vows to give up to God the one thing she's always wanted. But she's not just giving up a child right here with God. She's agreeing to give up raising him. She's agreeing to give up her family continuity. She is even giving up her unconceived son to the Lord for a lifetime under a Nazirite vow. That's a big vow. This is a potent vow. And Hannah makes good on it if you continue to read the story. So if you're paying attention to what I just said, this sounds a little like the covenant that God made to Abraham in promising to make him a father of many nations, to promise to give a divine son that was to come, which was his son, Jesus. At least I hear echoes of that in her vow and in God's fulfillment of that vow in this moment. Then this happens, down in verse 17. Then Eli answered, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him." And she said, "Let your servant find favor in your eyes." Then the woman went away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Love that moment. They rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah, and Elkanah knew, that's a word for sex in this text. Then Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Samuel, for she said, "I have asked for him from the Lord." Man, I love that little phrase in the text. And her face was no longer sad. 7 great words. Because you see, Hannah knows. She knows what's about to happen before she even leaves the tabernacle grounds. She knows that God is going to provide. Then she goes home and knows her husband. And soon after comes Samuel, of course, her only son, whom she asked for from the Lord. So what makes this story so incredible is how the long test and extended trial prove Hannah's character and reveal her commitment. Of course, God's provision in the end is awesome, but together, the story makes for an amazing story, even before we see that all this child Samuel is going to do in the coming chapters. Now, what you and I tend to want is God's provision, don't we? We want his provision the quick and easy way. We want it without the test and without the trials, which do nothing to give us the character and the commitment we need to handle the provision that God wants to give us. Let me say that again, very slowly, so you understand. We want things the quick and easy way, and we want it without the test and the trials, which do nothing to give us the character and the commitment we need to handle the provision that he wants to give. So, as you consider your own test or trial today, I want you to identify that test or trial and then identify what character and commitment God is trying to draw out of you. Then finally bring that character and commitment to God, and you will know what Hannah knew that moment at the temple. You will know great joy and peace, and then go in his joy and his peace today. I love you guys. I pray this has blessed you immensely. And with that, I'll see you right back here again tomorrow.